today. Reading from Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita Introduction. Continuing on from the last time when Jai Srila Prabhu spoke. We'll start with Jai Radha Madhava. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. And Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajikacharya Astotra Shodashi Shimad Savangre Sesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Jai, Navadvip Mahapodam Ki Jai, Gangamai Ki Jai, Yamunai Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees, all glories to all the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. That's okay. All right, so we're going to continue reading here from the discussion about the truths of Bhagavad Gita, which are mentioned here. Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Karma, and Kala. We're going to be discussing about Ishvara as opposed to Jiva. What's the distinction? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, here we go. Hope you can read this. So, the Supreme Conscious Ishvara is similar to the living entity in this way. Both the consciousness of the Lord and that of the living entity are transcendental. It is not that consciousness is generated by the association of matter. That is a mistaken idea. The theory that consciousness develops under certain circumstances of material combination is not accepted in the Bhagavad Gita. Consciousness may be pervertedly reflected by the covering of material circumstances, just as light reflected through colored glass may appear to be a certain color. But the consciousness of the Lord is not materially affected. Lord Krishna says, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti, when he descends into the material universe, his consciousness is not materially affected. If he was so affected, he would not be, if he were so affected, he would be unfit to speak on transcendentals as he does in the Bhagavad-gita. One cannot say anything about the transcendental world without being free from materially contaminated consciousness. So the Lord is not materially contaminated. Our consciousness at the present moment, however, is materially contaminated. The Bhagavad-gita teaches us that we have to purify this materially contaminated consciousness. In pure consciousness, our actions will be dovetailed to the will of the Ishvara, and that will make us happy. It is not that we have to cease all activities, rather, our activities are to be purified. And purified activities are called bhakti. Activities in bhakti appear to be like ordinary activities, but they are not contaminated. An ignorant person may see that a devotee is acting or working like an ordinary man, but such a person with a poor fund of knowledge does not know that the activities of the devotee or of the Lord are not contaminated by impure consciousness or matter. They are transcendental to the three modes of nature. We should know, however, that at this point, our consciousness is contaminated. Okay. So we'll stop there and we'll rewind and discuss these points as they come. Excuse me. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Amilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manu Vistam Stapidam Yen Bhutlai Swami Bhakiramayam Tadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Budlai Shrimati Bhakti Charya Swami Namani Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Budlai Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachani Nivashesha Shunyavadi Pashtuja Deshatani. All right, so let's see what we have in Prabhupada's introduction here. It's amazing that the whole essence of Bhagavad-gita is basically contained in this introduction. And the Bhagavad-gita has one of the key ways of understanding Bhagavad-gita is it's explaining 5 truths. Not the Panchatattva that we understand when we chant the Panchatattva Mahamantra, but the 5 aspects of nature. We've got the Supreme Lord, Ishvara, the Jiva, the spirit soul. We have material nature, Prakriti. We have the time factor, Kala, and we have the actions and reactions of karma. So today we're discussing about Ishvara, the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Conscious Ishvara is similar to the living entity in this way. Both the consciousness of the Lord and that of the living entity are transcendental. It is not that consciousness is generated by the association of matter. That is a mistaken idea. The theory that consciousness develops under certain circumstances of material combination is not accepted in the Bhagavad-gita. All right, so the first point here is that the living entity, the jiva, the tiny living entity, is transcendental, not material, spiritual. This is what we have in common with the Supreme Lord, that our existence is beyond matter. The Bhagavad-gita starts out very clearly on this point, that the soul is never born, it never dies, it's never created, it's never destroyed. It's eternal, always existing. Whereas matter is continually being transformed, creation, maintenance, and destruction. So this is the difference between matter and soul. This is the key point that we start with. You are not the body. I've heard in a lecture by Urmila that when Prabhupada was speaking to the devotees, he was saying, what should we preach first? And the devotees were saying, we should preach that there's a Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada said, no, first you have to understand you're not the body, that you're a soul. Then you can start speaking about the Supreme Soul, Krishna. That's interesting. And we can see this is the approach that the Bhagavad-gita took. Krishna didn't start out by saying, I'm the Supreme Lord. You have to do what I say. He started out by revealing or pointing out the nature of this world. That the soul is eternal, even though the body is always changing. So we know this is the first point of Krishna conscious philosophy. You are not the body. You are the soul. And if we put our attention too much on maintaining the material body or fear of dying, then it means that we have not understood the most essential point of Bhagavad-gita. The most essential point of Bhagavad-gita is that you are not the body and you're an eternal servant of Krishna. So death is not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is that we die and we enter into another body where we are covered and unable to practice our devotion to the Lord. In one of the verses that's described in Bhagavad Gita, it's 2, I forget, Ne habi kramanasyosti, that verse. It's saying that in the purport, Prabhupada says the greatest fear is to enter animal life, basically. So our greatest fear is not death. Our greatest fear is that we will lose the consciousness of Krishna and we'll lose our chance of practicing devotional service. We'll lose our opportunity to continue to develop our relationship with Krishna. So the first point is that we are the same as the Supreme Lord in the sense of our both being spiritual and eternal and conscious. Then Prabhupada moves on here. We talk about the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, that we are simultaneously one and different with the Supreme Lord. So we are part of Krishna, but eternally separated. It's described in Bhagavad Gita also that we're the eternal fragmental parts. That's the correct word, sorry. Fragmental parts. So we're part of the whole of Krishna. The material energy is described as a separated energy. So we're never separated from Krishna, but we have an individuality. So we're simultaneously one and different. And it's also described Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. It's inconceivable. So as much as we might get some idea of what's going on, there is the element of inconceivability that in our conditioned nature and in our limited capacity, we can never fully understand how it works. The Mayavadis and all the impersonalists, they emphasize the oneness aspect. And other Vaishnavas, they emphasize the duality aspect. And Lord Chaitanya says that the correct understanding is both. So, moving on here. Prabhupada emphasized so many times that life comes from life, not from matter. Prabhupada's mission was Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. He wanted to destroy impersonalism and voidism in the West. This is his primary mission. So what does that mean, impersonalism and voidism? It means the modern scientists in particular and the modern philosophers who have their impersonal idea that we are nothing more than machines. We are nothing more than biological machines, and that there is no soul. It's just an illusion that consciousness somehow or other is a result of the combination of chemicals. They've never been able to recreate this in a lab or anywhere. It's never been observed that life comes from matter, but it's accepted by many, by the atheists, as a truth. And even if someone may not be an atheist, there is the problem that in modern science, the foundational principle of modern science is that We only accept those things which can be seen with the material senses. We do not accept anything that there can possibly, that we can know. We do not accept that we can know anything beyond the senses. We're only allowed to look at matter. And so therefore we've completely avoided, we've completely blocked ourselves off from the source of this real truth, that the soul is what is providing consciousness to the body. And by looking for it in matter, we will never find it. One scientist was describing how by trying to find life, we looked into matter deeper and deeper to the atomic level until we came to the smallest level of atomic matter and found that life had slipped us by. I'm not quoting it word by word, but this was the gist, that they studied more and more about matter and that life was never to be found anywhere because they're looking in the wrong place. I've told this story before. It's a very popular story of mine, where I think you'll find it in some of these comics that are around, like a Birbal and Akbar story. There was, Birbal, what's his name? Akbar, the king, said, I want you to find me, 5 great fools or something. So one of the fools was found in the following manner. Birbal was out at night and he saw a man underneath a streetlight and he was searching around looking for something. And so then Birbal, he said to him, Birbal or Gopal Bhan, I may have got these muddled up, but you get the idea. So he's looking and he's asking the man, oh, have you lost something? Yeah, I've lost my keys. Oh, okay. Can I help you look for them? He goes, yeah, please. So then Birbal or Akbar or Gopal Bhan, whoever it was, he starts helping him and he's looking around and then he's like, the obvious question, where did you drop your key? And then the man says, oh, I dropped it over there, over in the shadows. Huh? So then Birbal's like, wait a minute, you dropped it over there. Why are you looking here? And then the man said, oh, the light is so much better over here. So this is modern science. They're looking for something in the wrong place. Life can never be found in matter. But because the scientists don't have any confidence about anything outside matter, they keep looking for it in the material world, in matter itself. It can never be found there. So Prabhupada was really strong that his mission, it's in his pranam mantra, was to smash these materialistic scientists who say that life comes from matter. This is the pivotal point. He also disputed the idea of evolution, because the idea of evolution is that things happen by chance. Chance means that there's no intelligence behind the creation of this material world. And it's directly against what is taught in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly states that there's a certain number of species of life that have been created by Lord Brahma at the beginning of creation. And these things, have been set in place by an intelligent designer. So Prabhupada used to argue on the basis of design. So these 2 points, that life comes from life, not from matter, and that the soul is, everything that we see in nature has been designed by an intelligent creator. And even the laws of nature that the scientists are so emphatic to, how should we say? They always want to argue, this is against the laws of nature. It's like, well, who made the laws? How can you have laws without a lawmaker? So this is how Prabhupada, without having to be a PhD scientist and talking in very complicated language, was able to use common sense and defeat this atheistic nonsense of the scientists with very simple examples and common sense. It's not required that one has to become, a great, a physicist or quantum physics, PhD or something to understand these things. A certain amount of common sense is all that is required. And this is what Prabhupada used. He was speaking to the common person, but even a scientist could not refute his arguments. So this is very important. Prabhupada really emphasized this. We shouldn't minimize Prabhupada's mood and Prabhupada's mission of kicking the scientists on the face with boots on. Prabhupada said, I want to kick on the face of Darwin. Darwin was the one who was propagating this chance theory of evolution, that just by chance different species come from each other, and that man came, that originally there was, the gist of the theory in essence is that there was nothing, and out of a big bang came the material world somehow. And then from there, somehow or other, life came from this matter. And then the evolutionary process began of random accidents leading to more and more complex and advanced forms of life. Whereas we know from the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the exact opposite, that the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is the most intelligent person. And then from him came Lord Brahma. And from Lord Brahma came all the other living beings. And gradually, down and down, the first sons of Lord Brahma are highly intelligent. And then from them, other offspring came, and gradually the lower species of life became manifest from the more intelligent forms of life. And this is where Dhruta Kama Prabhu has written a book called Human Devolution, as opposed to human evolution. The theory of evolution is that, from lower species of life, we evolved through to monkeys, and then the monkeys eventually turned into human beings. Whereas what Prabhu is talking about in his book is that actually we are the descendants of highly intelligent beings, rather than the other way around. I'm trying to remember how the joke goes, but there was a discussion between a son asked his mother, how did I get here? How did humans come to be here or something? And then the mother says, because God created us and put us here, something like that. And then the son goes to the father and says, Dad, how did we get here? And then he said, well, we were originally we were monkeys, and then eventually the monkeys turned into human beings, and that's where we are today. So then the son goes back to the mother and says, you lied to me. You said that God put us here. And then the mother said, your father was speaking about his side of the family. Anyway, but this idea that we came from monkeys, this idea that life comes from matter, Prabhupada was adamant. He was very strong that this is so important to argue against. It's all very well for us to, make friends with people and say, just start chanting, go on with your life as it is. But if we really want to bring in this Krishna conscious civilization that Prabhupada predicted, this golden age of Lord Chaitanya, we have to dismantle the atheistic scientific idea that life comes from matter. We have to strongly establish that life comes from life. There is a supreme personality of Godhead. We are not material, and he is not material, and that we're just in this material world as passengers in a way. We have to kick out the scientific, modern science, speculation and atheism. And that's why Prabhupada put so much emphasis on establishing the temple of the Vedic planetarium. He wanted to show that Krishna consciousness is not a sentimental or primitive kind of a primitive belief system or something. He wanted to show that the Srimad Bhagavatam provides the most comprehensive understanding of the universe, than any scientist can possibly imagine. And when I say imagine, that's basically what we're talking about. Just like the little frog in the well, he has a very limited experience and he wants to imagine, oh, maybe it's like this, maybe it's like that. You know, we cast out these laser beams into space, and by the light that comes back, you know, we make certain conclusions. But really, how much do we know? Just like with the dinosaur theory. Scientists find a bone here and a bone there, and then they think, oh, okay, well, if we put it together, this dinosaur must, have must have been this big, and it must have eaten this type of food. You know, we're talking like millions of years ago. How much can we really know other than just speculating? So we have to try to understand, you know, the difference between scientific facts and speculation. And there's a lot of speculation that's going on in the name of facts. Not to speak of straight out, manipulation that we won't get into right now. Manipulation meaning straight up lies to mislead people. So let's continue on. So life comes from life. So it's saying here that Bhagavad-gita does not accept the idea that life comes from matter. Consciousness may be pervertedly reflected by the covering of material circumstances, just as light reflected through colored glass may appear to be a certain color, but the consciousness of the Lord is not materially affected. Okay, so this is a contrast here between the Lord and ourselves. That the Lord may appear in this material world so we can see him, but he is not contaminated by this material world. On the other hand, when we enter this material world, although our original nature is pure Krishna consciousness, when we enter this world, the coverings of the three modes of nature make us act in different ways. And it's just like nowadays we have this virtual reality type of thing that goes on. The film The Matrix is the classic example that illustrated this to people in the world, where our real existence is something different from what we are perceiving. The trouble with The Matrix is that it gives this concept that the world that we live in is an illusion, but when you get out of the illusion, there's nothing. It's a very Buddhistic kind of conception. You know, like if you look at The Matrix, it's better to be in the Matrix than to be out of it, quite frankly, because you look at the condition of people outside the Matrix, it's just like I haven't seen all the movies, to be fair. I've only seen the first one, but my impression was that it was just like a barren, desert-like existence outside of the Matrix. But in the Matrix, you know, you could enjoy life like anything. And this is the effect of impersonal philosophy and Buddhist philosophy, is that people think, if there's no enjoyment outside of the material world, I'd rather be in the material world and enjoy it to the max. And that's why it's described in the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's purport. He's saying that Shankaracharya increased the population of the world by teaching Mayavad philosophy. How does that work? Well, because he said, look, when you get self-realization, there's no sex. And so people said, well, I don't want that then. So just forget this Mayavadi business. I'm just going to go for it and try to enjoy myself materially. And therefore, you know, sex life is the ultimate essence of material enjoyment. And so therefore, by denying that in the spiritual world there's a transcendental kind of sex life, he gave people the impetus to turn back to material sex life. It's just like, it's maybe a strange analogy, but different things that we teach may have the opposite effect. So Shankaracharya is saying, you should liberate yourself from this material world. and get free from it. And there's no sex life in the material world. And then people do the opposite and they go to more sex life. It's like in New Zealand at the moment, they have this policy that if you test positive for the coronavirus using the tests, then you have to stay at home for 24 days, something like this, a ridiculous amount of time. And everybody in your family also has to go into quarantine for that period of time. And so the government's telling everyone, wherever you go, you should scan in your location and you should get tested if you think that you're sick. So now people are like, well, I'm not going to want to get quarantined for 24 days, so I'm not going to scan in and I'm not going to get tested. The reason why you wouldn't want to scan in is that if, for example, you go to a cafe and or you go on a flight or something like this, and let's close it up. If someone tests positive at a place that you were, then you may also be required to isolate, and therefore, so now the opposite result is happening, that they want people to scan in, and they want people to scan in or to get tested. But now, because they've made the conditions so strong that if you get test positive, you'll be locked away, nobody wants to scan in or test anymore. So, this is, for me, it's kind of like an analogy as well, where we're telling people, oh, you should do this and you should do that, but this is the consequences. It makes people do the opposite thing of what you're officially telling them. So this is Shankaracharya. He increased sex life by telling people to give it up. And so then it's described here that when we enter this material world, we become covered by the material modes of nature. But when Krishna comes, he's not covered. So it's saying, Lord Krishna says, Maya Jakshana Prakriti. This is my energy, Krishna's saying. It's his material world, so he controls it. And therefore, he cannot be covered by it. And this is where the word Mayavadi comes from. The concept of Mayavadi is that Maya is more powerful than God. This is where the word Mayavadi comes from. The Mayavadi's theory is that God is one, but somehow or other, God has become covered, or a portion of God has been broken away by Maya, by being covered by Maya. So that means that Maya must be stronger than Krishna. So this is where the word Mayavadi comes from. So it says, when Krishna descends into the material universe, his consciousness is not materially affected. If he was so affected, he would be unfit to speak on transcendental matters, as he does in the Bhagavad-gita. So when we enter this material world, we forget our real identity, basically. It's the analogy that's given in this section is a coloured glass. That when we look through glasses of a particular colour, everything looks different. There's a movie called They Live, and the plot is basically this guy stumbles upon a group of rebels, and these rebels are producing these special glasses, and when you put the glasses on, it allows you to see what's really going on in the world. So you'll see that a portion of society is not actually human, but there's some kind of alien creatures or something that are ruling the world, and they're manipulating people through the media. So when you put the glasses on, like it'll have a picture of a woman smoking a cigarette or something, and when you put the glasses on, it says reproduce and multiply, and then there'll be another billboard that's like advertising some newspaper, and you put the glasses on, it says don't question, just follow the authority, and all this. So anyway, this is a movie about these glasses that kind of like show the reality of what's going on. Whereas in this material world, it's the opposite effect, that when we put on these glasses, they're like AR glasses or VR glasses. AR means we have some conception of what's real out there, but then there's these other things that are put in on top of it that appear to be real. Classic example, a few years ago, this game called Pokemon Go became really popular. And the gist of it is that you'd hold up your phone and you could see all the, normal surroundings and everything. But if the coordinates matched up with this program, then this cartoon character would appear amongst the scenery that you're looking at. This is called AR, augmented reality. So it's reality, but with something added. And then virtual reality is when what you see is not real at all. It's all completely illusory. So in this material world, it's like we've put glasses on and there may be a glimpse of the reality of what's happening in the world, but much of what we see is just an illusion. And because of this, we make wrong conclusions about what's happening. We think we are independent of Krishna, and we think that we are the Lord and that we are created by matter and all of these things. But Krishna, when he enters this world, he doesn't need glasses. He sees everything perfectly. So yeah, I mean, if Krishna was just an ordinary person like you or I, then what's the meaning of his Bhagavad-gita? He's just another speculator. And that's the problem with these people that give these unauthorized commentaries. They're conditioned souls, and they think that they are in a position to give their own version of Bhagavad-gita. Well, when Krishna says this, what he really means is, I had this experience many years ago. There was someone called Parthasarathi. And I thought, okay, well, that's a good name. That's a Vaishnava name. Let me go and listen to the lecture. So I went there, and I found him to be very arrogant in different ways. I won't explain why. But then he starts speaking on Bhagavad Gita. He says, yes, in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about karma. That is a low level, some materialistic activity. And then there's the next level, which is bhakti, which is the devotion. It's a sentimental thing. And then above that is the jnana. This is, knowledge. But above everything is seek the self. It's like, see, where did seek the self come from? I never read that in the Bhagavad Gita anywhere. And he was just speaking nonsense. But the irony, this is the irony actually. The lecture or the topic that he was speaking on was Bhajagovindam. And if you know anything about this Bhajagovindam, this is Shankaracharya's prayers, where he's saying, don't waste your time trying to twist meanings out of the scriptures. Just Bhaja Govindam, worship Govinda, the Supreme Lord, the cowherd boy who gives pleasure to the cows. So this lecture, the song, the whole purpose of the song is that we shouldn't twist our own meaning out of things. We should just take it as it is, worship Krishna. From that text itself, this guy is twisting out the meaning and saying, no, we don't have to worship Govinda, we have to seek the self. Oh my God, that's crazy. Anyway, that's just an example of, somebody who thinks they know better than Krishna. No, we have to take Bhagavad Gita as it is. One cannot say anything about the transcendental world without being free from materially contaminated consciousness. So the Lord is not materially contaminated, but our consciousness at the present moment, however, is materially contaminated. If we want to understand about the spiritual world, we can't understand it from a position of matter. Otherwise, we're like the scientist who's scrambling around under the light that he's comfortable under, but he doesn't realize that the truth that he seeks is somewhere totally different. If we want to understand, the truth, it's like we're basically locked up in a cage kind of thing. There's so many different movies. The other one is the Truman Show. So this guy, Truman, from his birth, he was put into this fake world where everyone was an actor and everything that happened was fake. The sun and the moon were not real. He was living in a dome. And everybody in this dome, who was the actor, they knew what was happening. He was the only one who didn't know. And every now and then, a person would say, hey, this is all fake. Don't you know that this is not real? and then those people would be shut up and taken away. So in the Truman Show, he's living in literally in this dome, and no spoiler alerts here, but in order to understand life outside that dome, you need someone from outside the dome to tell you about it. And then after telling you about it, they can give you the secret of how to get out of that dome and see the world as it is outside of your very limited, covered perception. But no one who's in the illusion of that world can help you to get out. It has to be revealed. So the Bhagavad-gita teaches that we have to purify this materially consciousness. In pure consciousness, our actions will be dovetailed to the will of the Ishvara, and that will make us happy. It is not that we have to cease all activities. Rather, our activities have to be purified, and purified activities are called bhakti. So I like this part when it says that our actions will be dovetailed to the will of the Ishvara, and that will make us happy. So another way of saying that is, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. Because when we understand that the controller and proprietor of everything, this is actually the peace formula. You will own nothing and be happy. Bhoktaram yagitapasham, Sarvaloka maheshwaram, Surudam sarvabhutanam, Yatva mam shantim richate. So it's one of the very first verses that I ever memorized. The peace formula. That when we understand that everything is owned by Krishna, that Krishna is the supreme controller, that he's the ultimate object of our worship, then we can be very peaceful. And that he's the well-wishing friend of everybody. Then, hey, this is perfect. Look, the person who owns everything and controls everything wants the best for us. And when we worship him, we certainly will please him, and he'll take care of us. So this is actually the real understanding of you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Because we understand that actually we don't own anything. Everything belongs to Krishna. The Ishopanishad explains that the Ishavasya principle. Everything is owned and controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everyone is given their quota. So when we're satisfied with the quota that we're given, and then we dedicate our life to serving him, that makes us happy. Not by trying to get more and more and more accumulated possessions, or trying to enjoy in different ways, materially speaking. Rather, recognizing that Krishna owns and controls everything and serving him. And this is the way that we purify our existence, and it allows us to actually see things as they are. Activities in bhakti appear to be ordinary activities, but they are not contaminated. An ignorant person may see that a devotee is acting or working like an ordinary man, but such a person with a poor fund of knowledge does not know that the activities of the Lord, or of the devotee or the Lord, are not contaminated by impure consciousness or matter. They are transcendental to the three modes of nature. We should know, however, that at this point our consciousness is contaminated. So this is great. So now what's been explained to us is that the Supreme Lord is never contaminated. By engaging all our activities in his service, we can become purified and also have the proper vision and we can become free from contamination. When we meet a person who's a pure devotee who has become free from this contamination, then when we hear from them, then we can hear the truth, because they're transcendental to the three modes of nature. So our goal is to become such a person. By serving the Lord and practicing bhakti, we can become free from the contamination of the material world, and we can actually help others. But we should be very humble and understand that we are not in that condition yet. At this point, our consciousness is contaminated. So it brings up a couple of points here. One point is that, we might see a devotee and think that they're just like an ordinary person. That, they might apparently make mistakes, or they may be acting in a materialistic way. Like Prabhupada said that, he was going into Delhi working very hard, printing books, dealing with money and business to be able to publish these books and to sell them. So someone might say, look at you, you're just a businessman, just like anyone else. You're materialistic as well. Prabhupada said, no, that's not right. We are working and doing the same activities that a businessman would be doing. But our goal is to please Krishna and to spread his glories amongst everyone. So this is the principle of Yukta Vairagya, that the pure devotee, he engages everything in the service of the Lord as best as he can. And even though there may apparently be mistakes or contamination, like Prabhupada, sometimes he might quote the wrong verse, or he'll say something that wasn't exactly right, but the meaning was clear. He might, this is then what happens. It's described in the Sri Ishopanishad that just like the moon, it apparently has marks on it. Doesn't make the moon any less capable of illuminating the night sky. And in the same way, Ganga may have dead bodies or foam or, apparently dirty things floating in her. But that does not make her any less able to purify those people who enter her waters. So in the same way with the pure devotee, we need to understand that small material, some minor material mistakes are not to be considered. But rather we want to see the intention and the dedication of that person's life to the service of the Lord. And then we can, trust in that person and associate with that person and become purified. So that's also reassuring for ourselves that although we are contaminated, our consciousness is contaminated, we are reassured here that by practicing the activities of bhakti, we can also become uncontaminated. It doesn't mean that we become the supreme. It means that we become free of material contamination. We return to our original spiritual condition as a servant of the Lord, our eternal position as a fragmental part of the Lord who is engaged in service. So, just to summarize the points we've covered here today, that the living being and Krishna are both spiritual. We have that in common. We are eternal and we are beyond matter. We have existed before material existence, and we will exist after the material existence. The difference is that we may become covered as a jiva, whereas the Supreme Lord is never covered. However, we are very fortunate that when we recognize that Krishna is the owner and the controller, the well-wishing friend, and the object of all sacrifices, and we dedicate our life to his service, we can become purified and get free from the material contamination that we're in and return to the spiritual world. So I'll end here, and I hope that these words were inspiring and enlightening, perhaps. And I pray that whoever is listening may bless me, that I may engage in this devotional service that's described here, and that I may become free from my contamination. Krishna's consciousness is pure. He never makes mistakes. My consciousness is covered, and therefore there are bound to be so many mistakes. But please bless me that I can continue to try and practice this bhakti so that I can become purified and be of service to others on a spiritual level and ultimately return to be with Krishna. Hare Krishna.